What's up, everyone? It's Nate Markham. Welcome to Shoot the Gap. It's the IDP Fantasy Football Show for the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network. It is draft's over. It is finally now fallout season for the 2023 IDP season. And who better to bring on with us than the number one finisher in the FantasyPros IDP ECR competition of 2022, my nemesis, Leo McNeely, a.k.a. Master IDP. I mean that jokingly, far from my nemesis. In fact, if anything, I have not the short of the utmost respect for that man. Of course, Hollywood and Jorge are joining me, and we're going to take a look at the fallout and see just how these prospects align, where they finish as everything kind of settles. But before we get tonight started, make sure you head over to the YouTube page, subscribe, link. I believe I heard that we were nearing 400 subs. We'd love to continue to add to the list. So, of course, you can always go to fantasyandframes.com and find all of our work over there from DFS, Dynasty, Redraft, and, of course, IDP. Guys, if you have any comments, I know we say this every week, and I'm sorry to harp on it, but please jump over to the YouTube page because that is where we can see the comments. I can see you talk shit about Hollywood, and I like to see all of your negative comments about him in person much more than having the comments that come through bypass. So head over there to the YouTube. And Leo, I say, welcome to the show. You're part of the chaos now. So tell everybody if they don't know who you are or where to find your work, which is, I can't imagine. What's going on?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on, Nate. I've been looking forward to this, and I've been talking to you guys for quite a while. I was happy to finally be on the show here. You can find me on Twitter at Master IDP. You can find my content over at rpofootball.com. Last year, you probably saw me on FantasyPros with Nate, and I also did some writing for IDPguys.org. But this year, you can find my stuff over at rpofootball.com.
Yeah, RPO.com is fantastic. Have you guys had a chance to jump over and check out a lot of his work, Hollywood? Oh, yeah. I know it's reading. It's not a lot of pictures. So,
wow. Just right out the gate. This is how we're going to play. Wow. I don't have to take it.
Yes, you do. And you like it, so it's okay. I'm a huge fan of your website, Leo. It is very well done. I was toying around with ours trying to get more data tables presented, and I love your data table. And I saw the plugin you use, the WP tables or whatever. And so I downloaded it, and I get 5 minutes into it. I'm like, no, I can't. It's too complicated.
I thought it was pretty easy, but I like the fact that you can put a lot more content on there and have it be scrollable. I mean, that's the nice part about it. So, I mean, in my current rookie rankings, I can put their weight, their height, I can put where college they went to, I can put all that, and when did they get drafted. So it really gives people a little bit more than just, hey, here's some rankings. Here's a little bit more info on these guys.
No, I love it. If everybody who's listening, go to rpfootball.com. Just great content over there, Leo.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Hollywood, how you been? Everything good?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. We were talking about baseball earlier. And
LIVIN, man. That's all I can do.
Yeah. Well, good. Jorge, it's nice to have you join us. I was worried that I wasn't going to be here, and you might not have been able to join. We got the whole gang.
That would have been a dream.
I know.
Yeah, exactly. Hollywood and Leo, what could possibly
So just for future...
It's not Leo that I would have been worried about. But...
Well, just for future knowledge here, Jorge, if you're out and Nate is out at the same time.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep. Well,
yeah.
Yes.
It would just be nothing but dead air from his computer.
Basically, Leo would be hosting the show. And then, to be honest with you, having the number one IDP ranker for FantasyPros hosting a show would not be the worst thing in the world. No, man, I'm excited to be back here. I'm excited to talk shop, excited to talk with all of you. It's been cancel the show. Stop.
I can't with him.
Oh yeah, it's great. I love talking shop. It's the NFL draft was so much fun. The first round full of IDP goodness. It's almost getting to the point now for me that when I'm watching the NFL draft, I get more of a kick from an IDP side than I do an offensive side, because you hear on TV, you hear on the radio, everyone's talking about offense. And so for IDP degenerates like ourselves, when we actually hear somebody's name get called that we've been talking about for months, it's like, yes, this is exactly what I was hoping for.
Yeah, and I think that should lead us in nicely to the IDP Inside the Frames question of the week. And Leo, I'm going to start with you. And really, It's like, after seeing, the results of the draft, let's use a balanced IDP scoring format in which players, their impact can add up in value right there with like solo tackles. What position group realistically versus the heavy scoring format, I guess is what I should do as that caveat. Is there a position group that you're targeting first?
Yeah, so I guess in kind of a balanced format, I think the defensive line group is pretty solid. Especially led at the top with Will Anderson. If you're looking more like a tackle heavy scoring, I'm generally going for the linebackers. Especially leaded up by Jack Campbell. I don't know that this linebacker class is as solid as the past last year, but I think you can still find some gems in there. Sometimes you're just taking a couple of guys and hoping that they pan out, but you kind of still have to invest in those linebackers in a tackle heavy format. So those are kind of two, pretty standard for me, kind of similar to last year.
Yeah, and Jorge, especially with the caveat that you're at the 101, and let's say that you're in a FantasyPros scoring, and there's a little more relevance, I would say, on some of the tackle heavier guys. Or the, I don't want to say sporadic.
Right.
Go ahead.
So for, even in like a Fantasy Pros where, it is more tackle heavy than, you do get versus the points for sacks and other big plays, impact plays. I would still lean towards getting these edge rushers, these defensive linemen with the 101, just because, when you have a balanced scoring, there's a little bit more wiggle room for being able to find fantasy relevant players at that position to insert into your lineup. Without that, well, now you're making the pool even smaller, and so now you really got to make sure that you're hitting home with one of these elite players, because it's just the position just becomes scarce after a while.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people were saying is this draft class, it lacks the hyper elite talent, but it's very saturated in above average and good players. And that's not a knock against Will Anderson, because ironically enough, as we jump into the some of the targets that we may have, and I feel like I don't know if it's funny as much as it's understanding that none of us chose to take Will Anderson in our listing, because I think that was kind of like maybe just low hanging fruit. And I think the easy answer that we would all, if we had a choice to take, is Will Anderson. Pretty much for the majority of us, our 101 from that standpoint, or is there a different answer? And if that's the case, you don't have to tell me yet. We can get to those people, because clearly I assume you would have added them to your list. I hope so, at least.
He would not be my 101 for IDP, to be honest with you.
I get from edge rushers.
Yeah. So I think we talked about leading up into the draft the potential, and then like we said all the time, it depends on landing spot, right? Mm-hmm. So landing spot and opportunity play a huge role into what into who becomes more IDP relevant in the short term and the long term as we go, right? Makes sense.
Right.
So I look at the situation. I won't say who I would have in his place. We'll keep that for later. But when I look at the situation, had the Texans not gotten rid of Okoronkwo, who played well down the stretch last year as an edge rusher, and then now you pair him on the other side with Will Anderson, now you have a good pass rushing tandem. Now you're able to take away some of these double teams that one of these edge rushers is going to have. And which is great for fantasy purposes, right? You want the opportunity, you want the win percentage to be in your favor, so on and so forth. But now that they don't have anybody, like who do they have? Jerry Hughes. Is Jerry Hughes still there? He's probably still there.
Jonathan Greenard.
right. But
Chase Winovich. Yeah, exactly. No, you're making your point. Well, don't worry.
So it's one of those things where it's like Will Anderson is like heads and tails, I would say, above beyond where they are in terms of play on the field. So of course this guy's going to get double teamed more, which is not great for fantasy.
Fair
At least
point.
that's how I view it.
No, I love that. I'm glad that that was brought up. But I'm going to start with our guest, and obviously he's number one overall in terms of ranking. So clearly, his everybody mark these down because this is Leo's flag plant season right now for his edge rushers. And lead us off, my friend. Who are you taking an eye on?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I'll start with a defensive lineman that's not an edge rusher, and I'll start with Kalijah Kancey. So he's somebody I'm targeting in defensive tackle requiredly. So a big caveat is I'm not targeting him in a league that just has a DL designation. So Kalijah Kancey, he's going to be the second defensive tackle off the board. Jalen Carter's going to go first, and then if I'm going to get him a little bit cheaper, but I like him in a league that can score sacks because I like his first step, off the ball. He's, had the fastest 40 time of all defensive tackles ever at the combine. So I see the potential there for the sacks. When I'm looking at a defense tackle, I'm not looking for the run stuffer. I'm looking for the guy that's going to, get me that big point for the week and help me get points from defensive tackles. Most people kind of, view that defensive tackle as if I can get a few points, I'm good. But I think Kalijah Kancey can do something here, pretty quickly. He's a little bit undersized. I know some people, try to put an Aaron Donald comparison just because of the size, but that's shooting for the moon. That's too early to get anybody, to be at that level. But I like his ability at the defensive tackle position. What do you think about him, Nate?
I do. I like Kalijah Kancey, and I hate and love the Aaron Donald comparison. I heard another comparison that I think is probably a little more fitting or equally as fitting is Ed Oliver. And I think that is another one where, again, if you, from a real NFL standpoint, if you get either of those two, even 90% of Aaron Donald is elite. And in a defensive line league only, he fits right in. I don't see any real negative path to significant snaps for Kancey this year. And like you said, that first step and that ability to get pressure is huge. And he might be, I think I would have him one actually over Jalen Carter in my drafts this year, just simply because how many rotation spots the Eagles have and not knowing exactly the snap percentage there. You guys thoughts on Kalijah Kancey?
No, I obviously in my thought process, being somewhat of a smaller player, that kind of helps with this athletic profile where he's not just going to be quote unquote a space eater who's not going to be able to get upfield to get to the quarterback and apply pressures. I think his ability and athleticism to shed those blocks and actually get into the backfield, whether it's getting you for fantasy, those tackles for a loss, or getting you that sack production or those quarterback hits, depending on whether or not your scoring settings allow for that. Mm-hmm. Is huge. It's big. And the opportunity should be there also. So you mentioned it with the Eagles, that rotation is going to hurt basically anybody along that defensive line, especially the defensive interior. So yeah, that's Leo. There's a reason why you're the number one ranker, man. And yes, I am sucking up to you, but I don't care because it is.
Well, thanks. I guess I'll go into my next guy. Before that, I'll say, I kind of look at him a little bit kind of like Geno Atkins. Ed Oliver is another good, comparison, and Geno Atkins would be another one that I kind of see similarities to. But the next here, I'm going to go with an edge, and I'm going to go with Felix Anudike-Uzomah for Kansas City there for you, Nate. Mm-hmm. He got drafted at the end of the first round, so that's two years in a row. Kansas City's picked up a edge rusher at the end of the first round. They recently lost Frank Clark and Carlos Dunlap. I see a lot of similarities. They're going to try to put him into that Frank Clark role. They in the offseason they got Charles Omenihu. He's a kind of more of a pass rush specialist. I think Felix has the ability potentially to be that 3-down player. I mean, some of these edge rushers take a little bit of time to develop, but I think he's got that bend. He's going to need to build his strength a little bit, but I definitely see a possibility. He went in the first round. He got that good draft capital. I they have high hopes for him, and there's the ability there. So I think he's got it, and hopefully he can put it all together. So he's somebody that I'm looking at there as a potential edge rusher that can produce right away. Not just for Dynasty.
Yeah, he was a target from, months back. They have always had his name penciled. In an ideal world, it would have been they could have traded up and moved up into the second round and gotten him there to complement like a receiver or an offensive lineman in the first. And when pretty much the run on offensive linemen receivers were gone to the point, he was so far up on their list, and he fits Spags' defense extremely well because he can move inside if need be and let him in who play that edge. The one thing, like to start off the season, sure, I think he might not see 50-60% of the snaps within the first couple games, but he does. He, exactly like you said, has that bend, has that power speed kind of combo to really do exactly what should happen. Is most teams will be passing against the Chiefs. The opportunity for significant pass rush snaps or significant point scoring snaps is extremely high for him. And so I love that you put him on there. I thought that was just a very nice way of coming in and saying, sorry that I whooped your ass in the rankings. Here's FAU. It's a consolation prize. I know Hollywood and Jorge would never be so gracious, but you are a very gracious guest. Hollywood, I'm sure yours, first of all, no one can see this, but of course on the show sheet, everybody likes to fill in some things. Hollywood decided to fill his in hyper color yellow, which was completely I couldn't read a single thing. So I'm guessing who he even has in there. I don't even know. So you're going to surprise me as well, Hollywood. Who you kind of taking a look at it for that edge defensive line spot?
I think you're colorblind because it's in red. So I don't know what you're looking at.
No, your notes were clearly in like that neon yellow before somebody made a comment.
That was probably me.
I didn't change anything. Seriously, we're talking about my first defensive lineman here, and it's in red. So it's Will McDonald for the Jets, right? He's a super senior. 42 TFLs, 34 sacks, 64.2 solo rate. 20 to 21. That's if you really want to see how good he is. That's where you need to go, right? So, 2 years in 25 games, he had 22 sacks, which is almost a sack per game. So, he's got the size, the length, the radius, right? Big tackle radius. And he goes to the Jets, defensive minded, and they've already got Jermaine Johnson over there, right? So he's going to be playing opposite of him. They've got Cartwell. I don't think they have Carl Lawson at the moment. I don't know what his contract thing is, but if they could find a way to bring him back as a veteran of the group, that'd be nice. You got your old veteran pass rusher that can teach everybody in those two young guns, and I think Donald's going to be he's going to be the beneficiary of a really good rookie season.
Yeah, I like Will McDonald a lot. I thought that Jets team Jets, they do one thing extremely well. They draft defensive linemen.
Yep.
Good. And playing, obviously.
And they got Quinnen Williams. That don't hurt either.
I was going to say, playing with Quinnen Williams obviously will help your ability. I'm looking up right now Carl Lawson's contract status. And as of now, I mean, I guess he's got this year. And then he's, UFA next year.
Yeah.
But as he just... I see him as being an impedance, of course, but not one that I'm hyper, concerned with as far as the season goes.
I would think the impedance would be more early than it will be late.
Of course.
If you can wither the first, 8 games of the season and take your lumps with McDonald because Lawson's there or whatever, I think those back 9 through the playoffs, you're going to make up a lot of ground on people, because I think that's when Lawson's going to be kind of pushed to the side or say, hey, this dude's way better than I am.
Hollywood, I got a question for you. And this is going to kind of tie to the offensive side of the ball for the Jets. If the addition of Aaron Rodgers, and if this Jets offense starts taking off, pun intended, And you're seeing the offense on the field more so than you see the defense like we had in previous seasons, just because the Jets offense has been inept for so long. The defense has had no choice but to be on the field longer, so you have more opportunities for plays. If that's not the case this year, and this Jets offense and this Jets team is more competitive, and you're seeing less reps here for these defensive players, does that help or hurt McDonald here? I mean, does it help in the sense that, well, it keeps him fresh?
It helps him, right?
Game? Okay, that's where I was going with it. Okay, yep.
I think it helps him because you're kind of going back to the Manning effect, right? Most likely you're going to be playing with a lead in most games. And what did those defensive ends do in Indianapolis? Pin their ears back and went and got the quarterback. So if you're playing with a lead with Rodgers and Wilson and Lazard and all these boys, Cobb, you should have the lead, most likely, in most instances. And you're just going to let those defense and two young, hungry pass rushers on the outside. And you've got Quentin Williams, and we talked about Carl Lawson. I don't think it hurts him at all because you're not paying him to – well, we're not paying him nothing, but you're not drafting him on your fantasy teams for tackles, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're drafting him for that sack number. And if he's playing with a lead, he may play less plays, but those sack number plays may go way up, especially with Rodgers. So that's kind of how I look at it.
And so 9 hours ago, yesterday, I guess we'll say this morning, it was mentioned that they did have conversations with Lawson to rework his contract. And if he isn't willing to do so, there's a chance that they will cut him, especially considering Aaron Rodgers' mammoth contract. And so Rodgers restructuring his may allow some leverage and some leeway for Carl Lawson, but that is still a potential in the cut. And if that were to happen, of course, then you have even more snap percentage for him to occupy because there's, I mean, no offense, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't think much in the way of the battle on the other side between John Franklin Myers and Jermaine Johnson. I think that could be gross. I don't know if I want anything to do with Jermaine Johnson again this year yet. Do you, Leo? Do you think John Franklin Myers actually is just? I mean, those two kind of rotate and alternate snaps, or what?
Yeah, that's part of why I'm a little hesitant on McDonald, in year one, just because of kind of the rotation that they have there, especially if Carl Lawson comes back. I mean, you got a lot of guys in a rotation. I mean, I like guys to get on the field a little bit more to help with production. Snaps are still king. I mean, it's nice to have, some guy that might just do the pass rush to stay fresh, but for the most part, I'm taking the guy that's on the field a little bit more. So yeah, Jermaine Johnson didn't do too much this past year, so I'm kind of, downplaying how much McDonald can accomplish in year one, and maybe he'll be an exception. But a lot of times these rookies take a little bit of time.
Hollywood, what else you got for defensive line? I know that you went with maybe a household name in Will McDonald. You got maybe a lesser name.
Yeah, so I kind of just one of my favorites from past few college football seasons. So plays in the MAC, right? And that's Carl Brooks, who's going to Green Bay now, incidentally, which I love the landing spot. Mm-hmm. Super senior again, right? So I like these. A lot of people say, well, he's older. Well, you're just going to have to fight through that for the next few years because of all of this COVID season stuff. So he's another super senior, but still 46 TFLs, 27.5 sacks, 46.1 solo rate. So he wasn't making all the tackles, but he was around them, right? 60% or the other 64%. So 6 forced fumbles, 6 PBUs and a pick. Blue collar, 100% motor. He's got the size to. At Bowling Green, he was more of an outside guy, but they kicked him inside, and I think you're going to see some of that here in the NFL because he's 6'4", 295. So he's a big dude, right? But he can play outside and play it effectively. And competition level is with the MAC, and I get it. You play lesser competition, that's a knock against you, but what should you do when you play lesser competition if you're really that good? You should dominate them, and that's what he did. Mm-hmm. So he's not going to be a high draft pick for IDP, but if you've got a 5, 6, 7 round pick and you need a defensive lineman, especially if you can play him at defensive tackle, yeah, I'll take him all day.
Absolutely. Now, Jorge, you alluded earlier that your number one edge rusher is not Will Anderson.
Right.
I'm intrigued to hear who you have. I'm not going to argue because you have the floor, my friend.
Well, he's the one that I'm probably the most excited about, just because of what happened last year. Let's jump back.
Mhm.
You know, we saw what the AFC West turned into with the addition of Russell Wilson. At the time we were all thinking, okay, well, this Broncos offense is going to be high powered. The Chargers offense is going to be high powered. We know the Chiefs offense is going to be high powered. How could possibly the Las Vegas Raiders keep up with these high powered offenses? And that was on the defensive side of the ball, getting after the quarterback. And what did they do? They got Chandler Jones from Arizona, who, all the years leading up to last year, every season for fantasy, we would always be like, that Chandler Jones, he's still sticking around. He's still super productive. He's still consistent. And then what made that signing so impressive was like, oh, well, now he's going to be paired up with Max Crosby. Well, now we got this edge rushing tandem where you're going to get these, one-on-one opportunities on either side. And that's going to equate to, a situation where, both of them could find fantasy success. And what happened? Chandler Jones, it just didn't work out last year. Max Crosby was the primary beneficiary of that. You saw Chandler Jones and his productivity, his win rate, go down, his pressure rate go down, as opposed to previous seasons. If not for a Jacoby Myers, toss to get a touchdown to end a game in the regular season last year, like, you wouldn't be saying anything for Chandler Jones as far as fantasy production. So, flash forward to the NFL draft last week when they selected Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech. My immediately first thought is like, okay, first of all, kudos to the Raiders for not giving up on their plan from last year, which is, look, you have to go after these quarterbacks. You have to go after these offenses if you want to stay competitive in the AFC West. And they bring in Tyree Wilson. There was some rumblings last week, and I didn't look it up because super super awesome and lazy, that there was an injury concern with him or something heading into last week that potentially pushes draft stock out of the first round. That didn't happen. Raiders took him. And you look at his production last year in college: 61 total tackles with a 36-25 split, 14 tackles for a loss, 7 sacks, forced fumble recovery. You look at his advanced stats over in PFF. He was the edge rusher 9 in total pressures in the Power 5, at a 17.7% pressure rate. His win rate was top 13 amongst all edge rushers, with a 22.3%. Look, for fantasy purposes, what's really awesome is his fact that he, on Sleeper, for example, he has a dual designation defensive linebacker, which is great because that tackle floor, it's not high, or it's not super high, but it's serviceable. It gives you like a moderate tackle floor which to build off of. He's an athletic freak. This guy can do everything you want as an edge rusher. And for those, again, for scoring settings where you get points for quarterback hits, where you get points, more points for tackles for a loss, where you get, the decent point totals for sacks, big play leagues, balanced scoring, this guy is going to be fantastic. For those tackle heavy leagues, probably not so much. And especially if you're not counting quarterback hits or TFLs there. So I like them. I like what they're doing. I like the pairing. I like the tandem with Max Crosby. And unlike Chandler Jones, who is kind of on the decline over his career, you have this young, athletic defensive end who could produce, great numbers for him. The situation, I think, is fantastic. The game script is in his favor, in the terms of like the defense is probably going to be on the field a lot because, Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't exactly inspire confidence in me to keep that offense on the field for the Raiders. So yeah, I'm excited about Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, the devil's advocate real quick as far as Chandler Jones, only defending him because it felt like I constantly almost had to, as bad as the season he was. If you look at the last 7 weeks of the season, he was he was number one basically with 6 games or more played on and pressures per game, but he was 14th overall in that time frame in terms of pressures. That being said, I don't trust him one bit. I think Tyree Wilson will be more than active and will be more than involved. And Leo, it was a foot injury he suffered against Kansas, subsequently had surgery on that foot. Missed the camp and training days because Dr. Anderson, Robert Anderson, who did the surgery, which is always a check mark when you get an orthopedic surgeon like him doing it, said he couldn't sweat during the incision healing, and so he couldn't practice and take part of any of the pro days or the any of the other camps. But he did put up 23 reps while he was recovering. So, Leo, does the foot injury at all give you pause, or is that strictly just something that maybe they were posturing to try to get his draft stock down to a team that might be a little better?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it right now. I mean, we're playing for the long haul here, and I haven't had too much concern with foot injuries recently from some of the guys, so I'm not concerned at this point about him. He's my second defensive lineman that I'm looking at. I like Tyree Wilson. I think he's got a good blend of power and speed. Yeah, but Jorge talked about all those pressures. I mean, it's hard to deny him. So he's my second defensive lineman. So I don't have a problem if somebody wants to be a little bit more aggressive with him, though.
And Jorge, you also put an interesting note that on Sleeper, some of these position designations, as we're going to start seeing this going forward, he does actually have the defensive line and linebacker, which I know most people will say, well, yeah, no kidding. But with the ever-changing paradigm of position eligibility, that is key. Hollywood talked about Carl Brooks on the Packers. The Packers weren't quiet in drafting defensive line this year. Who else did they acquire?
Well, no, in the first round. I'm sorry. You want to?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. No. So they in the first round they drafted out of University of Iowa Lucas Van Ness. It should be noted that on Sleeper he is currently just defensive lineman only eligible, and that's okay. The cheat code. I think when you have these dual eligible players on a platform like, for example, Sleeper, is you're hoping that the person's has a high tackle floor that you can insert into your defensive lineman spots. Now you got the tackle floor on top of the pressures and the sacks and so on and so forth that can take you over the top and help you outscore that. That being the case, I really like the tandem. I really like the potential tandem here that he has for Green Bay. Assuming Rashawn Gary can come back, all the reports you've heard about Van Ness leading up to the draft, high motor. His stats were really impressive. 37 total tackles, not great solo to assist ratio. It's only 17 to 20. That's, he's not really the tackling guy. He's the tackle for a loss guy. He's the sack guy. He was 10th in total pressures amongst 2023 draft eligible players, 14th in pressure rate. One of the knocks against him is that he doesn't have a lot of experience. I believe he was a junior coming out this year. So there is some negatives here. Obviously you don't have the tackle floor that help you at the defensive line spot. But if you're in a platform that, for example, doesn't, allow for, these edge rushers to fall into multiple locations, or you just have, for example, a defensive end only spot in a platform. Like I know NFL has that, ESPN has that option. Sleeper does not yet. He is somebody who I think, again, this is more of like a long-term play that he could potentially do some good. The concern here, I guess, the caveat here I would throw in here is I mentioned Rashawn Gary and pairing him off as bookend defensive ends. I'm a little concerned whether or not this is hey, let's pair him with Rashawn Gary, who's coming off of an injury last year, or is this a Rashawn Gary replacement? Because they're concerned about his injury, because the last reports that I read about Rashawn Gary is that the GM, was it Brian Gunderkoos, just his name? I always butcher whatever his name is. The Aaron Rodgers killer in Green Bay, as I like to call him. He, when asked about Rashawn Gary heading into March, there wasn't like, it wasn't like a confident, he'll be ready for the start of the season. It's like, no, he's going to miss some time. And that makes sense, right? He got injured in that Detroit game in, I want to say it was like October, early November. So he's going to be missing some time. So I'm wondering whether or not that's going to thrust Van Ness into a starting position, opposite Preston Smith along that defensive line. So, it's either going to be baptism under fire where you're going to see Van Ness there, in which case I'm a little bit more concerned in starting him or putting him into my defensive lineman spot. Given all these concerns, the cautious fantasy manager in me is like, maybe I'll draft him in the later rounds. I'll get him, but I'll either have him on my roster if it's a deep bench, or I may even taxi squad him just to see what's going on. And, as we head more into the off season and hearing more about the status of Rashawn Gary. But either way, I think even if he's just only a defensive lineman person, for example, on Sleeper, I'm excited for his output. And the fact that the Packers took him in the first round, I think draft capital says a lot also.
Yeah, those leagues that defensive line only. I mean, especially like Leo talked about earlier with Kalijah Cansey, and then you've got I would say a handful of names that would be even considered out of this draft class right now, and Van Ness would definitely be one if you play on Sleeper for that. Of course, as we've said every single day on every single podcast for every single year, know your rules, know your settings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the rules that I like to follow is I like to draft players that have a clear path to snaps. And that's why I think Byron Young might be one of those sneaky plays at edge defensive line this year, because I don't see anybody standing in his way. I mean, right now at outside linebacker, the Rams have, on the right side, Michael Hecht, and on the left-hand side, nothing. I mean, they really don't have anybody standing in the way whatsoever. And Hollywood, I know that you had a chance to watch him play at Tennessee, and the story for the young man is tremendous. And I'm not drafting him because he, has an amazing story. It's nice to build on. And if you don't know much about him, he had like 0 offers come out of high school, and he ended up taking a job as the assistant manager at a Dollar General, and then decided to walk on to Georgia Military. Grew, got bigger, was a JUCO transfer. His first year with Tennessee, played 8 of their 11 games. He had 11 TFLs, 5.5 sacks, continued to grow, continued to learn the game. And his senior year, 7 sacks, 12 TFLs. The one thing that I've been told is that his ability to actually kind of even not just rush the passer, but defensively is capable of playing a multitude of different positions, or kind of, if you will, but smart enough to be able to be a 3-down edge rusher, as well as with the shallow depth for that team. I don't see any way that he doesn't see at least if the top 2 or 3 most snaps of anybody of the rookie class as far as edge rushers go. And I don't think that's too crazy to predict. Is anybody let down? Hollywood, I let you start since he's your guy at Tennessee. Fill in some more of the holes that maybe I left out on Byron Young.
Yeah, I'm with you on the depth chart ahead of him, right? The Rams don't have a whole lot, if anything, because they got rid of all their picks. That's them picks, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're seeing they're having to use those picks. So, great story, from the Dollar General to JUCO to big time SEC football. And man, combine freak, right? He goes to the combine. He just flat scooting, right? And he looks the part. He plays the part. He tested the part, and he gets to wind up next to Aaron Donald somewhere. So, and on a depleted depth chart. So, yeah, I'm with you. The volume that he could have could lead to huge numbers. I was going to pick him, and you already had him on your list. So, yeah, I love this pick.
The whole Tennessee thing, Leo, Brian.
Yeah, their whole defense is it needs a lot of improvement. The safety, they need another safety, they need another linebacker, they need another defense. Their defense is the worst accumulation of talent there. So like he's going to get playing time, he's going to get opportunities, he's going to get tackles. You could knock the fact that he went in the 3rd round, which is a little bit later than you would typically like to have, your defensive lineman go. Mm-hmm. But I think you hit on a lot of good points there.
25-year-old rookie. Of course, we talked about that earlier. It was a red flag potentially, but not for a person who's just getting acclimated to real football. I think he's growing into his body. I know that's such a weird thing to say at 25, and I know he's done growing, but utilization of his speed properly is one thing that some people never can actually do. They don't know how to harness that 4.47 speed and turn that, or 4.43, sorry, into something productive and useful, not just get behind everything every single time. From one situation, I followed on your path, Leo, in that I like the idea of a defensive line only option, and it could be one or the other. I like Brian Brzee, and the one thing that about that is, from a defensive line only position, is that if it wasn't for that ACL, that ACL injury, he would have been a lot higher rated, graded and ranked. That's a huge injury, of course, and he had kidney infection, his sister passing away. It was just this multitude of situations for a guy who, everything could tumble his draft stock, and he continued to hang in there, held his head high. He jumps into a situation that, for me, I think is a perfect fit. David Onyemata's gone. Shai Tuttle's gone. Brian Brzee, as far as size, can fit right into the middle of that. He kind of fits that blend, too, from what New Orleans looks for, in that Clemson played multiple front sets. So if he jumps in, he's going to play tackle. If he's going to play 3 technique, they want to move him out to outside wide. They can do that. He's played the predominantly left defensive tackle in college, and I know that they're going to probably transition him to maybe play more the right-hand side. But just from a defensive, DL position only, I'm more than happy to invest. I do worry about the injury just a little bit. I will be honest, any ACL injury is a little concerning, but I think that might just ultimately drop his draft stock down enough that he could become a value again. So there were a few other guys that none of us left off. I'm going to skim through real fast. If anybody, if one of these people is something you have a little tidbit on, or you even want to extrapolate on, feel free to do so. But BJ Ojulari steps into a good situation with Arizona. Miles Murphy, I think, in Cincinnati. Here, all right, Leo, quick question. Miles Murphy, Cincinnati. Is this a replacement for who? That's going to be the question. 2 years ago, you would have said it's, Sam Hubbard. After last year, might be Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, I guess I'm not viewing it quite like that, but I think that he can fill in both of some of their deficiencies. Like he can be on the field, for certain situations to spell, Hendrickson, and there's certain times where he can spell Hubbard. So I think he can kind of fill a little bit of a dual role and really round out that combination. So I don't know that I'm seeing completely a replacement, but those 3 guys combined can kind of make up, 2 good players in my opinion.
I just don't think there's enough cap space for them to be able to keep both after they sign Joe Burrow. It's gonna create a couple spots where they're gonna have to maybe make some cuts, and maybe that's the potential for the replacement. But for this year, it's not.
Yeah.
Keon White, super freak athletically in New England. Blah. I put this one in here for you, Leo. Isaiah Foskey with New Orleans, simply because he is the first player in Notre Dame history to have back-to-back 11+ sack seasons. That,
Yeah, I almost put him on here just to represent Notre Dame. For my wife is a double domer, they call it. He graduated twice, with a master's there. I really like what I saw. Of all the college games, I watched the most Notre Dame games, and I really liked what I saw. Him coming, and New Orleans. Cam Jordan's not getting any younger, and they, Granderson, has been pretty decent, but I like what I've seen. Out of Foskey, as he'll be kind of taking that role from Cam Jordan as he moves on at some point here.
Yeah, sooner rather than later, hopefully. But regardless, let's move on to the position that I think many want to discuss as far as IDP goes, is the linebacker position. So Leo, let's start with you. And number one, I guess, when you're picking at linebacker, are you looking more skill set or opportunity?
Both. I don't know that I can completely commit to one or the other. For the most part, I see Jack Campbell as a number one, but he's probably going to be too expensive for me. I'm still going to be probably drafting offense at that point. So I'm looking guys kind of the next year that I can get a little bit cheaper. I just drafted Drew Sanders today, but these 2 guys are kind of a little bit more a little bit cheaper that I'm looking at. So Deion Henley out of Washington State, he went in the third round to the Chargers. I really like the opportunity. The Chargers brought in Kendricks. I don't think Kenneth Murray is going to be hanging on too much longer there. So what I'm looking at is that he's got the right size, he's got the right speed, and can the guy cover and can he make tackles? And so I think he has all those abilities. But then it's like, is he going to? He's another Devin Lloyd. Can he go and do it now that he's on the field? So I see similarities to the size, the makeup. He produced in college. And he got picked one pick before Trenton Simpson, which a lot of people had going, potentially as a first rounder. And so the Charger liked him enough to take him over Simpson. So I think there's something there. So I like that kind of profile, and that a little bit later that I can get him a little bit cheaper and has the upside there. Another guy is kind of a little bit similar is Dorian Williams out of Buffalo. He's going to be even further down. I think he's going to be even a little bit further down, even though he only got picked 6 picks later than Henley. Henley may be a little bit more ready to jump in, and it's a little bit more crowded in Buffalo. They're not really necessarily committed to Dorian Williams taking over Tremaine Edmonds' spot. So there is a little bit of risk of how that's all going to go. But I think you play the long game, and you're more playing for year 2 with Dorian. But there is upside that he could win that spot out of camp. And, he's beat out Bernard and Dodson and Klein. So he played some Mike in college. He has a good coverage grade. So, he potentially has that 3-down ability that I like. So those are two guys that a little similar profile, size, speed, that might be a little bit cheaper is kind of what I go for.
Yeah, I think that's a wise move, especially Jorge, we talked about this before the draft. Linebacker is pretty weak as a whole in this draft class. There's not a ton of super impact IDP stalwarts unless landing spot was just ideal. And I don't think there was a ton of ideal landing spots except for maybe 2 of the ones that Leo just touched on. The Chargers eventually we know will move on. There will be an opening, and Buffalo loses Tremaine Edmonds. And of course that just starts the carousel between that. And I mean, Dodson and Terrell Bernard, come on. As much as they had impact when they played last year, we know that they were always waiver wire fodder, but that's what they are, waiver wire fodder. So Jorge.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to let you go because I'm going to make Hollywood wait a little bit. And I'm intrigued to hear you mention one of your guys we talked about before the draft. And sounds like Leo just drafted him in Drew Sanders.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to say, if memory serves me correctly, Hollywood, during our linebacker prospect episode, this is one of your guys, going back to some of his performance last year, as far as inside linebackers, and that's the key here, inside linebackers here. He was in the top 30 in rating according to Pro Football Focus as a pass rusher, which is impressive for an inside linebacker. He was top 3 amongst all inside linebackers with 39, tied for number 1 among inside linebackers in sacks, number 5 amongst inside linebackers in win rate against offensive linemen. There are a lot of you just, so going back to what you were just saying, Nate, these true linebackers didn't really exist. There's a lot of Swiss Army knife capabilities here, right? Whether they want to bounce inside or outside, or have the role of, playing against the run versus being those edge rushers or being those pass rushers rather. When you throw in his metrics compared to other outside linebackers and defensive ends, he's still in the top 30 according to PFF in terms of one of the the pass rushers in the Power 5 in 2023. His stats last year, again, high tackle floor, over 100 total tackles. Solo assist ratio, 40 to 63. That is not obviously ideal, but the overall total tackle volume is ideal for raising that floor. 13 tackles for a loss, 9.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 5 passes defended, and 1 interception. Drafted by the Denver Broncos. If he's asked to play outside linebacker, I think his talent is enough to supplant a Baron Browning, or even to a certain point, Randy Gregory, who's not getting any younger and who it seems like for one reason or the other, he's always missing 5 games or something, whether it's injury or whether it's suspension or whatever. I think this move for Sanders here, prior to today's news, which Leo broke, thank you very much, Leo, was something to pay attention to. Now, here's the thing. Leo, you mentioned it earlier when you tweeted it out. Sleeper today gave him a dual designation of defensive lineman / linebacker. Folks, in your IDP rookie drafts, this to me is why you want to go target Drew Sanders as far as one of the top linebackers you can get, especially or IDPs even in your rookie draft. It's because of this dual designation. Because like I said earlier, like the 103 total tackles, that tackle floor is a high tackle floor he's going to come in here with. And then you're going to put that as a defensive lineman in your roster spot. I mean, yes, will he be competing with tackles with Singleton? Will he be competing with tackles with Josie Jewell, assuming Josie Jewell can stay healthy, which is a guarantee over the course of his career. So one way or the other, he's going to have a solid tackle floor. If he has to jump inside, great. He has the pass rushing upside. If he has to pass, be an edge rusher or defensive end, he's still going to have the tackle upside. So this guy is out of University of Alabama, just an amazing player. This is an amazing situation here for fantasy purposes, having this dual designation. I mean, folks, I can't stress this enough. If you're in your IDP rookie drafts or you're new to IDP and you're looking, this is your first rookie draft, just play the game within the game. Get the, really hammer home these dual designation players that have high tackle floors like a Drew Sanders, and I guarantee you're not going to walk away disappointed leaving your drafts, having him on your roster.
Mm-hmm. Who's the other one, buddy? And I like next one too.
Sorry. So, it hurts a little bit being a Commanders fan, but DeMarvion Overshown, linebacker out of the University of Texas, he now only has the linebacker designation only. Okay, that's fine. He's a converted safety. He turned linebacker in college. Who's physical. All the scouting reports say that he's physical and he's patient enough to play the run, as well as athletic enough to play in coverage and get those tight ends. In 2022, he had close to 100 total tackles. He had 96 with 49-47. So he's pretty. He's there. He's around the ball. 10 tackles for a loss, 5 PBUs, 4 sacks, which is pretty impressive. And that goes back to his patience, whether it's playing the run or going after the quarterback. And what really, for me, makes him an interesting target that I'm actually going to be going after. I know, Leo, you actually posted on Twitter that he went undrafted in one of your drafts or one of your leagues, so you got him off of waivers or something.
Yep.
To me, after hearing the news that Micah Parsons could be specifically going as a defensive end, and now potentially you're having your IDP designations in your leagues, having him just as a defensive line eligible only versus an edge rusher, that to me makes Overshown even that much more valuable, because it's they bring back Van Der Esch, so he's going to be on the field. They have Damone Clark, who had some good weeks last year. Nate, you wrote him up a bunch of times, in the waiver wire column. But Overshown is just, I think his smaller build, being that converted safety to a linebacker, his ability, his speed. That's the thing. That's the thing right there. The linebacking position for Dallas, I never would associate speed and linebacker in the same breath. But this guy is he's everywhere, all over the field. He can be asked to do anything you want. He's, like I said, out of the University of Texas, just a tremendous situation. This is, again, another example of how, while talent is obviously something you want to go after and look at when you're scouting a player, finding a great landing spot, finding a great situation where now you're probably going to be the best linebacker in that linebacking core. Now you're really setting yourself up for success.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that is a key thing. Can you imagine how dangerous that defense can be once they, and don't get me wrong, Leo, let me ask you a question. Micah Parsons, let's say he does make that move strictly to edge, and losing linebacker designation doesn't change my value of him necessarily, other than the versatility. But do you think his overall IDP upside is limited by moving onto the line?
I mean, definitely in tackle heavy scoring formats, definitely. But he's already mostly been playing, a defensive line position already. So I don't see a major change, maybe a little bit, but maybe he's going to bulk up a little bit and maybe lose a little bit of speed. But I don't see a big change on it. He's already been playing that position, and he's already, I think he's my number one defensive lineman. He's at the top of that list. I mean, right there with Bosa and Myles Garrett. So I don't see a big, he's so valuable at the defensive line position that I don't think it makes a big difference for me.
Yeah, I don't either. I think designations are nice when they work in your favor, kind of like linebacker Marte Mapu with the New England Patriots. If you look on Sleeper, he's defensive back only, which isn't completely shocking. There's no true idea of where he's going to play. He was a converted safety to linebacker last year. He, unknown for the majority of conversations that I've seen people have, but Daniel Jeremiah said he's his favorite player of the draft. And when Daniel Jeremiah says that, of course, I'm going to dig in and look and see what am I missing? Why did he kind of go, not even underrated? Because if you look, obviously, draft capital, New England, a la maybe Kyle Duggar, kind of looked deep, found a safety, similar size, similar potential role. Mapu is the nephew to Junior Seau, by the way. And he, you don't talk about checking linebacker boxes. Hollywood says this all the time. Check each one of those boxes and see fluidity and versatility on the field. Eventually you will see your name more involved on that, the scoring sheet. And he's good in coverage. He's good in run stopping. He can blitz. He's able to man up in coverage. He has good instincts when in zone. The question is going to be will he have a role on that defense? And I don't know right now, because I've seen some reports say that, Bill Belichick has his fourth strong safety locked up and just wait for him to move up the depth chart and see what you have. Well, I don't want to draft a person who might be the fourth strong safety behind, Duggar, Jabril Peppers, and then maybe the third, I guess, if he's the third. But as a, kind of a strong side linebacker with these new, I don't want to make up a name of a position because I don't think that's fair. And I'm not smart enough to come up with a cleverly titled name. And defensive coordinators are utilizing these athletes more so. One caveat, we know not exactly ideal when you're going to New England as any position because Bill Belichick doesn't care about your fantasy team. But I think we're starting to see, and the reports have been that he's inclined to use some more of his athletes in more athletic positions. And if that's the case, Mapu, especially as a defensive back, if he lines up and plays significant snaps at a linebacker position, that's a cheat code. That's the, that's the cheat code that we all look for. And I'm trying to think of, examples off the top of my head. And of course, when you need to do it, you can't. And if someone else was talking, I could run off probably 3 or 4, but that doesn't matter. So I won't even try to do that. And I'll just go to the next person who, and this is more of a dynasty move. You talked earlier about him in Trenton Simpson, in that, why did he fall? I don't really have an exact answer. I feel like there was, I think maybe scheme fits weren't there. The Ravens, who knows? Maybe the Ravens did what the Ravens always do, is maybe strike gold with some of these, second and third round picks. This is a third round pick who has the speed. He's got good range. Obviously, Patrick Queen's fifth-year option was recently declined, which sets up a position for him to play alongside Roquan, which is just always enticing. Question is hopefully there was a lot of hype with Patrick Queen as well. If we remember when he got drafted, we thought, wow, what a great landing spot. He's with Wink Martindale at the time, and this is going to be perfect. Wink moves on. Patrick Queen never really has. He had a decent, last year was probably his best year he's had. And I don't remember, any time maybe ever, I guess, is not a hard bar to leap over. But I'm optimistic for Trenton Simpson to become a usable linebacker. And, more so probably in Dynasty than this year. I'm not 100% certain that, because I don't think they'll actually move on from Patrick Queen this year. As much as he wants to be traded or they're something, I think now that they re-signed Lamar, he's probably keeping his mouth shut and just going to, sit tight is my guess. But there's, a couple really honorable mentions. I have one that I want to ask you guys about. And I love the landing spot as far as where he went. He was undrafted, and that's Ivan Pace Jr. goes to Minnesota, and I love him. Jorge, similar to like kind of London Fletcher, undrafted, undersized, great tackling, upside. Leo, is he someone that you're taxi squatting or that you're even looking at as maybe just that guy that has that, that fire to become a machine, especially if they move on from Jordan Hicks at some point?
Yeah. I mean, if I've got a 53-man roster, and you're grabbing some guys to put in. I love to fill it out with linebackers that have a shot. I mean, I love his production in college. I mean, I was a little surprised he didn't get drafted. I do like Pace. I mean, I heard saw some comparisons to like Denzel Perryman. So I like his profile. I'm surprised he lasted, but Asimo is is the clubhouse leader for that second spot, but he's still a little unproven. So there is an opportunity there. I mean, obviously they've got Jordan Hicks at the number 1 spot, but he's somebody I'm interested in stashing if I got the room.
It's crazy. Like every report you read about this guy, the very first line of every first paragraph is, if it wasn't for his height, he would be the insert superlative that highlights just how awesome of a player he is at the linebacker position, right? Mm-hmm. And it makes me wonder, at what point does the talent just take over and he just shuts everybody up, right? I mean, there's opportunity. There's an issue of opportunity, and so you mentioned Hicks. Yes, that is absolutely that's going to be an impediment to his talent, his opportunities for tackle volume right there. But we saw moments last year where Hicks was actually deployed a little bit more in coverage, right? And so you saw Kendricks kind of reassert himself in the tackle floor department. But then that went back and forth. So things kind of got crazy with the defensive side in this linebacker deployment for Minnesota. But no, he's definitely one of those guys you're rooting for hardcore. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I do. I think there's a few other linebackers, but we've said this. They're just, linebackers not super deep. Noah Sewell, bad landing spot. I think in Chicago. Yeah,
that pissed me off. I was hoping for something a lot better than that. You already have Edmonds. You already got Edwards. Why the hell did you? I mean, it just. By the way, the reference for fantasy that you were talking about, defensive back linebacker, Devon Diablo, he was dual eligible.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good one.
Last year, so
nice. Speaking of defensive backs, Hollywood, give me a couple defensive backs that you may be looking at this year.
Yeah, so both of mine are kind of like later round guys, right?
It's all right.
So you got your Brian Branch, you've got your, most people thought Antonio Johnson, right? What a kind of big surprise he slid a long way. But I think we talked about Jorge on the defensive back show. I talked about J.L. Skinner, right? And I told you guys he was number 3 on my list as far as defensive backs. I think his junior and senior years were completely different in how they played him, right? His junior, he was more of the deep safety kind of free guy. And his senior year, because they didn't have much linebacker help, they had to kind of play him up in the box more. So it was a completely different role. But what I'm getting at is he did very well in both fits is what I'm trying to say. So 6'4", 218 linebacker size, but he's got track speed. He ran 11:30 seconds in 100 meters back in high school, so he can flat out fly. Height, weight, athleticism, 208 tackles, 63, basically 64% solo rate. You got your 9.5 TFLs, your 7 with 7 interceptions, 20 PBUs, 2 forced fumbles, 3 recoveries. And I don't think people actually understand how good he is. He can play, as I said, play deeper up in the box, but his range is just, for that size, is crazy. And when he gets there, he's going to light you up. He's going to hit you. So draft night, I always sit down and for all 3-4 days, whatever it is, I always sit down and I write down every defensive player, what pick they are, who they went to, and this, and then I give just a little quote. And as soon as they pick Skinner, I thought, man, what a great fit in Denver, right? Next to Caden Stearns, who they drafted last year. Now, I know Peyton wasn't there, but Stearns is a pretty good player for them last year. Behind some aging veterans, right? So they got 2 veterans up there as the starters, but you're going to bring Skinner in and Stearns most likely. Big playmaker. He can do it all, whether he's in coverage or he's coming up against a run. Yeah, definitely like Skinner. He's a little older, 25, but like I said, that's been my whole thing all night, right? I'll take those super seniors because you see him as old in mileage, I see him as experienced, right? So it tells me a lot when they can produce.
No, that makes sense. Before you jump into the second defensive back, I didn't give you the floor to talk about your linebackers, and it shouldn't even have remotely been overlooked because you quite possibly have the number 1 IDP linebacker. So I'm going to give you the floor, Hollywood, to do those, and I apologize for that. All the discoloration and the changing fonts had me screwed up, I guess. Can you remember who they were? Yes.
No, I know who they are. It's no need to apologize. I figured he's just running short on time. You like to talk, so whatever.
That's true.
Yeah, of course, number 1 is Jack Campbell, right? Detroit. 305 tackles, back-to-back 100 tackle seasons, 13 and a half TFLs, 3 sacks, 5 picks, and 15 PBUs. So a lot of people see him because he's 6'5", 243. They think he's a 2-down thumper, right? Well, he is. On those first 2 downs, he's going to beat you up, beat you down, kind of Debo style, right? But then on 3rd down, the money down, that's where he does his best work, man. I mean, he's good in coverage. He's not great, but he's good in coverage. And that's where his impact plays come from. So, yeah, I really like that. IQ instincts, play processing. He can do it all. And a lot of people are thinking, well, you've got Malcolm Rodriguez, you've got Alex Anzalone, who you just re-signed, I believe. Well, you didn't take this kid at 18 for him to sit on the bench. Right. So the volume's going to be there. He's going to get the opportunities. So, right away, I like him, and I think he's IDP-wise, he's the 101 overall because of that volume. He's going to get that shot, and he's going to produce. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I hated the landing spot kind of initially. Not hate's a strong word. I wasn't thrilled with it, I guess. I think that was a product also of being so disappointed with Detroit not taking going running back linebacker with the 2 picks when I had a lot of high hopes. But you go from Jack Campbell, the 18th pick overall, to a player who was taken at pick 216 in D. Winters. Tell us why D. Winters with the 49ers is someone you're targeting.
Yeah, so initially when they drafted him, my first thought was, is he going to replace Azeez Al-Shaair, right? Mm-hmm. Because he left and went to Tennessee, so there's an opening. And it just kind of fits, right? You got your big dog in Warner. You got Greenlaw as his dynamic sidekick there. So that 3rd guy just needs to come in and do his job play. So I think that was my initial thought there. 2022 college playoff defensive MP in the semifinals, 7 tackles, 3 TFLs, had a pick, returned it 29 yards for a touchdown. So to me, that kind of shows you his whole range, right? He can come down and make tackles. He can play behind the line of scrimmage, and he can cover and do some stuff like that. Good speed, 4.49, right? 40, has good range, and I think he's just a terrific second-level defender, right? If you're getting anything third-level deep where he's picking off, that's icing on the cake, and if he's playing behind the line of scrimmage, same thing. So I think in that second level, that's where he racks up, especially with Warner and Greenlaw.
Nice. I think that's one of those names that you need to check that I feel like kind of went underappreciated or at least undervalued, especially because like we've talked about, the pathway to snaps, it isn't that far away. I mean, what, Oren Burks? Is that really who he probably has to beat out to get significant snaps? And maybe not maybe not 85%, but there's a spot ready for him to take over. And yeah, I think that's a sneaky good later round pick there. And so we'll go from the second level. We'll jump back to defensive backs. Hollywood, I know I'll give you a break to catch your breath a little bit. But Jorge, we talked about Antonio Johnson earlier slipping a little bit.
Right.
Did he slip to the perfect landing spot as far as DBs go?
For like real football, absolutely. I think it's only a matter of time. So Antonio Johnson, defensive back, Texas A&M, selected in the 5th round by the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he's sliding into a great spot. He is all the scouting reports have him basically stating he is going to start out being a strong safety. He plays close to the line of scrimmage. He's a run stopper. He doesn't do anything really fancy. He has played Nickelback. I say Nickelback, and then immediately I think about the band. I'm still scarred from the early 2000s. Anywho, he does play some slot. He does. So there is that there, but in terms of his usage in college, it was basically being a de facto linebacker, being a run stopper. So if he's able to, supplant Rayshon Jenkins, Rayshon Jenkins, he had some good weeks for fantasy last year.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that translates into actual good football play on the field, that is another thing. So the issue really becomes opportunities. It becomes snaps. It becomes does Antonio Johnson supplant Rayshon Jenkins at a certain point? And so from everything that I'm reading here, whether it's scouts, whether it's team, local reporters, whatnot, that's a real possibility. And so if he's able to get on the field, I could definitely see him being somebody that you'd want to you could feel confident having as a defensive back. Now, that being the case, in my chances are in your dynasty leagues, you've gotten some safeties, you've gotten some tackle heavy cornerbacks if you wanted to insert them into your spot there. Would I have him on my active roster? Yes. On the bench, obviously, for starters. He's not somebody who I think you could draft and immediately put into that starting spot in your starting roster for fantasy purposes. But again, another player who has the upside, taxi squad him at least for a year, and then probably next year he becomes the de facto starter, if not towards the end of this coming year. I love I love what he does. I love his skill set. I love how he's been used, and his path to snaps, like you mentioned earlier. That's kind of obviously the big thing right there. You're finding out the opportunity. I like everything about him, to be honest with you.
Yeah, again, like I said, landing spot. I could think of a few teams that I would like a little bit more, but They didn't. That's my opinion on those things. So until that happens, we will. I'll just continue to talk to you three about it and go from there. Oh, look at that! People love you, Hollywood. I don't know. Do they love you more than Leo loves Jordan Battle?
Yeah, I mean, so these two guys I like, Jordan Battle, I think, and Sidney Brown. I kind of have them right pretty close with Brian Branch. Brian Branch probably will be off the board probably by the time I take a safety. I usually target those after linebacker and defensive line. But Jordan Battle, I think with Jesse Bates being gone, Von Bell being gone, it's pretty wide open, next to Dax Hill. Dax Hill kind of fit the profile of, slot and free safety. So I think Jordan Battle can jump into that strong safety spot, which is really what I value when I'm looking for a DB, is somebody that can, get those tackles. Obviously nice if they can be playmaking, but default, if you can get those tackles, you've got that nice floor built into them. So, he's going to have to beat out Nick Scott, but I think he coming from Alabama, he knows how to play, and he'll play the right way and be in the right spot. I really think he fits what I look for in a defensive back. And then the second guy, Sidney Brown, he's a little bit different profile than I typically go with, but Sidney Brown for the Eagles, he got drafted, pick 66 overall, which is pretty early for defensive backs. He's coming out of Illinois. He's 5'10". That's the only thing that, is a knock on him for me. But I love his playmaking. I think he had like 6 interceptions this past year. He's very versatile. I think they'll line him up in a bunch of spots. He's going to play for the Eagles, which, their defense makes opportunities, with all those guys. I think with TJ Edwards being gone, Kaiser White being gone, do we trust Nakobe Dean completely? Like, there's going to be some opportunities for those safeties to make some plays with all those guys in the front. So I think there's some pretty good upside. He's my number 2 defensive back that I'm looking at, and somebody I'll probably be trying to get a hold of.
Yeah, and Philly's usage of him, if they have to line up in man coverage. Last year at Illinois, he led all safeties. He had 5 interceptions in man coverage alone. He was, I'm an Illini fan, and I got to tell you, just amazing watching him. And granted, it's funny, it's going to parlay into 2 potential other names we could talk about, one of which is a corner in Devin Witherspoon, who none of us picked any corners to discuss in defensive backs, which is not shocking. Hollywood, is if you had it one corner that you were going to pick, is it Witherspoon, is it Christian Gonzalez, or is it someone different?
I think it's Christian Gonzalez for me, right? I know Witherspoon kind of fits what Detroit wants to do, that aggressive, in-your-face, workman-like corner who can defend the run, right? Mm-hmm. But Gonzalez, I was kind of surprised to see him slide, right? A little bit, because I thought he was easily a top 10, top 12 pick. And for New England to get him and what he can do, I don't think Bill Belichick's had a corner quite like that, right? Especially with his size, speed, weight, athleticism, skill set. Now, he only done it 1 year at Oregon, but man, what a 1 year, right? Played it into a first-round pick, and he looks the part. I've a couple drafts that I've already had since the NFL draft. He's kind of went late, and I took him as a flyer in both of them. 7th, 8th round, especially in a position-specific league. Yeah, he's definitely worth a shot.
All right, let's go ahead and get your slander out of the way. Yes, I know the Colts in drafting Nick Cross, a Fantasy and Frames favorite last year, went from starter to their best special teams player. He led the Colts with the most special teams tackles. So there's a positive. If you play in special teams leagues, Nick Cross is someone you can address and go after. You're welcome. First little tidbit on special teams leagues only. But yeah, so Gate, I want to, before I jump into this person. Actually, you know what? No, I want to hear your slander. You got me on the edge of my seat with this whole Nick Cross can get beat out by Rodney McLeod year 1, and then maybe someone else.
Yeah, so this will tell you a whole lot, right? This will tell you a whole lot about what they think about Nick Cross. He had the injuries or whatever, and I liked him last year too. But Daniel Scott, they got him 4th, 5th round? What was it? I can't remember right off, but it wasn't early, wasn't super late. So this dude can play some ball. If you watch, if you sit up and watch the Pac-12 after dark, you saw a lot of him, right? At UCLA. Has incredible range and speed, can cover a lot of ground, and when he gets there, he's going to hit you, right? 207 tackles, 66% solo rate, 7 TFLs, 7 interceptions, 14 PBUs. So you're thinking somebody that kind of plays like a strong safety that'll hit you. Well, he's probably better in coverage than he is, playing the strong. So I think he definitely challenges Cross. If Cross can't get healthy and get on the field and show him, then yeah, there's definitely an opportunity there for him to pass up Cross. So, and one more thing, he played 600 plus special teams snaps, right? So there's another thing. He's already playing special teams. So this dude can play. I know a lot of people haven't heard of him because of the Pac-12 stuff, but Go watch his game film. He's a really solid player for them.
Yeah, and there's, I alluded to earlier the Illinois talk from Witherspoon, Sidney Brown. There's one other name out there, and that's Jartavius Martin, who got signed by Jorge, your Washington Commanders. As far as Illinois safety / star, which the star position for Illinois is a slot corner and free safety kind of hybrid role, which he did last year extremely well. I mean, he should jump right into a nickel role with Washington. Bobby McCain's gone, and that Jorge should be happy for that. Being able to throw Jartavius Martin into that role, he's got good instincts. He's great in coverage. He's a great tackler. He had the 10th lowest missed tackle rate in the NCAA last year. He was second. He had the second most tackles amongst slot corners. So even in slot roles, he was more than aggressive towards the ball, capable in coverage, does the best when he can watch the passer. And with him in that kind of that slot nickel role with Washington, he has that ability. The question I want to see, and Jack Del Rio hasn't done it a lot, he doesn't blitz his nickel or his slot corner all that much. Bobby McCain blitz, I think it was 18 times last year, maybe 25 the year before. And then the year before that was he didn't have really a slot. He only had Landon Collins blitzing. That could be an opportunity because Jartavius, he's a good blitzer. He has that ability. And so we'll see. I'm not going to say he's going to be this elite talent yet from an IDP standpoint, but what we've watched over the last couple of years is that these defensive backs that have that slot role, that have the blitz ability, can stop the run, play in coverage, L'Jarius Sneed, et cetera, are becoming more of the DBs to target if it's not one of the elite box safeties. So I like Martin. We kind of touched on the cornerbacks, but Gator has one question as far as this goes. So, guys, of the players that you've talked about tonight, who was the player you're taking first and last? Leo?
Of my guys or just all guys in general, I guess, that we've talked about?
I'm going to say of all the guys we've talked about total.
Yeah. So, for me, Will Anderson's, is my number one. Him and, and then I guess going to the end, there's a couple guys I think, Hollywood touched on that are kind of off my radar that I haven't heard of, and I probably don't watch as much college football as him. So like there was Black and there was another guy. So I'm going to throw a couple of guys that I don't even know about yet because they just haven't hit my radar. He's a little bit deeper. I have to give him credit. He's more into the college stuff than I am. I'm still playing catch up a little bit. I'm a tax accountant, so I'm busy in the first couple of months of the year. So I'm still learning a couple of those guys down the road here. But it's been fun.
Jorge, you still stick with Tyree?
I am. I still think, regardless if it's a big play or a balance, again, defensive lineman, is a slippery slope. You get past the first, 10, and then it's, you're grasping at straws here. So I'm still going Tyree Wilson.
Yeah, I would say I would probably play it safe, knowing you guys did. If this was a draft, I would follow it up with Jack Campbell. I'm gonna say it's hard not to. I just don't like any of the linebackers that much, and that's why I want to go edge. And it would be Will Anderson for me if I could have the one myself. Hollywood, you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Who's your 101?
So my 101 is Big Campbell. Right? Yeah, I mean, they drafted him early, so he's going to play. He's going to get the volume. Instantly upgrades the defense that position. And he's playing in fantasy. He's playing the premium position, linebacker. Don't overthink it, right? 100 tackles, like I said, the last 2 years plus. There's no reason he can't do that again, maybe lead the team. So, fantasy-wise, it's definitely Campbell for me. I think NFL-wise, it kind of changes a little bit because I think it's definitely Will Anderson. He's just a monster of what he can do. So, Yeah. I think those two kind of separate themselves from everybody else.
Yeah, there's just not that one, after last year, it'd be easy to hit your wagons to any of the box safeties that jumped right into the league, a la, Brisker or Petrie. But we don't have that this year. And so I think it's going to be he who possesses the most snaps. So, we know how that goes. Anything else, you guys? Any other players that we missed? I think we figured we touched on every person possible in the draft. I mean, I know it was it's nice to finally put some resolution to the landing spots for some of these guys. Right. And I'm intrigued to see as the season goes on. Just week 1, Leo, how high up is Will Anderson going to be in your top 26?
That's very specific.
Yes. I don't know. I was trying to find a good spot.
Top 26 of defensive players overall. Yeah.
No, I'm going to say just defensive lineman.
Yeah, I'll put him in my top 25 defensive lineman. Yeah.
There you go.
I see he's going to be producing right away. I mean, defensive line, once you get past the top 12, there's room to get him in there.
It's about the only one. I don't really care what you two are going to do because we're going to have plenty of time to talk about that.
Wow.
Leo, again, remind people that might have been late jumping in where they can find some of your work and what you got cooking.
Yeah, sure. You can find me at Master IDP on Twitter. You can find my content over at rpofootball.com. It's been a pleasure being on here. Next, been working on Dynasty stuff and rookie stuff, but now I'm kind of cranking into projections for the year. So it never ends with IDP and never ends with the football season as a full, year-round thing. So it's been fun. I'm coming into May, my full year kind of as a content producer. So it's been great. It's been fun interacting with all you guys and being welcomed into the community. It's been really great, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of you guys at the expo coming up here. So it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's I look very forward to seeing you at the expo. And Jorge, Hollywood, you guys, thank you. Thanks for everybody being here tonight. It was nice to see get the whole gang together. I feel still off my I don't know, my flow right now. I got to get it back before football.
You're getting there. You're getting there. Though. It's early. It's early.
It's base. I'm too much. I'm getting notes from baseball. I got to pay attention. You guys deserve my undivided attention. But I won't be back for a couple weeks, so I'll see you guys in a couple weeks, though.
Sounds like a plan. But just for the sorry, Gator. For those who are watching next week, we have John Macker for PFF joining us, as well as don't forget to head over to our YouTube channel and fantasyandframes.com to read more of our IDP Dynasty target profiles and articles. So lots of stuff coming your way here from Fantasy and Frames. Okay, Gator.